G'day, hi, and welcome. Let's just jump into this. Yeah, alright, let's. What you heard there was a jam night I did about 2 or 3 years ago. I'm not sure if it was 2017 or 2018. And it was just a couple of guys. We're just doing just a improvised jam, kind of ripped off the Stranglehold Ted Nugent thing that I kind of ripped off. I saw Ted Nugent with Damn Yankees way back in the 90s, and he did that Stranglehold thing, but he did like an instrumental version of it before he took it into the song. It was actually quite cool. So I kind of, you know, use that as kind of my jam night kind of, okay, it's all the key of A and A major, and it's really easy to get everybody on board with it. So it gets a little bit mundane after about 2 or 3 minutes of it, but it's a lot of fun to play and stuff like that. And that was I talked about in a previous video a Stratocaster that I used on stage through a little Fender Junior amp. They're like 10-watt tube amp. And the next video I'll probably throw in is my SG61 reissued, going through the same amp, like a totally different. You'll hear the difference between the humbucker, the classic 57 humbuckers, and that Strat single coil. Now, mind you, that's a Squire Strat of some sort. You could hear how weak, like those pickups. I had everything cranked. I had the gain cranked. That was all I could get out of them. But not bad considering. Not bad considering. But the clean sounds of that guitar was actually quite good. So that's why I'm not a Stratocaster guy. I know you can get a HSS Strat and stuff like that with the humbucker single coil. But yeah, Strats are like I know that you put hot rails in them, you can get a lot more gain out of them. But you really need to push a lot of gain through a Strat to get gain out of a Strat. But when you get it right, it does sound pretty epic. But anyway, I thought I'd do that. And the folder I'm using is, I think, my Metalhead folder. So there should be some pretty funny memes amongst this one. So you can read and listen at the same time. But the topic of today, I was going to do a video on guitar scale lengths. But because I'm in roof raking mode, and for people down south, what I'm talking about is up here in the Canadas, when Mother Nature decides to dump a whole bunch of snow on top of people's roofs, they call me and they say, "Can you come and take this stuff off before it collapses my roof?" And I've been kind of in that mode for the past couple of days, so I haven't had the chance to put together a really good extended range versus standard ranged guitar scale length video, which I'd like to get that one really good, like get really scientifical with it, so that when people are picking a guitar, because a lot of people don't know how to buy a guitar, um, and you'd say, well, it's not hard. You take your money, you go to the counter with the guitar, and you buy it, or you use your credit card over line or over the internet or whatever. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about buying. I mean, you could throw your money at anything, right? And you might not necessarily get what you want. What I'm talking about is more of buying the guitar of tool to the job of what you're going for. Like for example, if you were a metalhead, the guitar and amp setup that I was just playing through you would probably say, okay, it sounds good, but it's not what I'm looking for at all. Like, I'm not looking for that vintage sound. If you were, if I was up there with my Jackson Flying V, that poor little amp would probably catch fire because those pickups are so hot, that darn guitar. And I love this. I love this meme. Dogs. I love dogs. I love dogs and metal. Yeah. Day 28. They still don't know I'm a dog. I forget the name of that band, but they're a black metal band. They're actually pretty good. I can't think of the name of them right now, but they're actually pretty good. They have that song "All Shall Fall." It's like pretty cool. Um, anyway, yeah, like I say, like you a metalhead guitar like my Flying V is probably not going to work for somebody who wants to play blues or classic rock, or just like edge of breakup stuff like you just heard of there. That's edge of breakup, meaning the tubes are just starting to saturate a bit. Yeah, it was on the gain channel, so we get a little bit more, but like that's not a metal sound, right? So when you're picking a guitar, if you use the recipe of the guitar, it can get you into the ballpark of what you're looking for without buying like 10 guitars that are not doing the job for you. Some guy's playing a metal guitar and it's dark, heavy mahogany guitar and really dark sounding and all that, and he's trying to get an Eddie Van Halen sound and you can't figure out why. Whereas if you bought the altar body guitar, it'd solve his problem pretty much right away with a maple fingerboard and maple neck. One way to make it easy is whatever sound you're going for, just buy what they're or something similar to what they're using. That'll get you close, but that might not always be the answer either. So, but anyway, that's another topic for another time. For today's topic, it's basically, if you can't make it big, should you give up? Give up playing as a musician. So this is a little bit less about gear and more about philosophy of music, and entertaining and whatever. Now, for those of you that have been around a little bit longer and been through a bunch of bands and stuff like that, you've probably, some of the stuff I'm going to point out, you're probably going to say, yeah, I've been through that. And then some of you that are just probably looking to join bands and stuff like that, I'm not saying that these are people to avoid or whatever, some of them might be, but it's just something you're probably going to come across, and when you do, how you handle it might be, change. You might take a different approach or a different attitude towards it. So, riddle me this: if you've been in a bunch of bands, whatever. So I'm 49, 50, somewhere around that age right now. And back in my heyday, it was like pretty much from my teenage years to about 24, 25 years old, about the mid 90s. I was in bands, pretty much, my very first band was called Fenris Wolf. Yeah, yeah. No, sorry, that was my second band. My first band was called Earthquake. That's right. Earthquake and then Fenris Wolf. And then after that, I kind of forget a bunch of them. And then my first real, okay, we're playing bars and stuff like that was called Reckless Angel. And then after that, the band that I think was the best band that I was in was called Syndicate. And Syndicate was, yeah, we did covers, but we had about 8 or 10 originals. I almost can't remember them now. We had a female singer. She had a 3-octave range, and guys, her voice was like, this woman could shatter glass, but her talking voice was so nasally. She was like, "Hi guys," and we'd tease her about it all the time. She was a short little girl named Stacy. We loved her like a little sister, but we like tease her and everything like that and whatever. But when she would finally show up for the gig, she'd always show up like 2 minutes before she'd have to go on stage. She was horrible that way, but. Yeah, she'd get the, she'd make you panic all the time. But anyway, but when she was on stage, she was like really, really good. Like she really and some nights she'd have a hard time with her voice because just playing 4 nights a week, burns out a person's voice, and whatever. And but when she would turn on the pipes, I mean, like the people in the bar would stop and turn, like they'd stop and listen. They're like, "Wow, that was cool," like that scream. Wow, how did she do that? Um, and I was the bass player was a guy named Dave from Annihilator. So if you ever heard that song "Alice in Hell" from Annihilator, I think he helped write that song. But then he got kicked out of that band, so that's his story, not mine. But anyway, he basically he was the bass player, and then the drummer and we'd been in several bands together. His name was Scott, and then of course the other guitar player who was a big Dimebag Darrell fan at the time. He had the MT model and stuff like that, and named Mike, and him and I had so much fun. I still contacted these. I'm still in contact with these guys to this day, although they, some live on the far side of Toronto and stuff like that, and yeah, the guitar player still lives in Ottawa, but we haven't seen each other in decades, right? And stuff like that. So I talk to him sometimes and stuff like that. It's he still has that same sense of humor, that I remember. And him and I, many fiascos. We had a lot of fun, but that band, okay, at the time, you would call us progressive metal. We didn't have a keyboard player, but if we would have stuck with it, chances are we probably would have ended up with a keyboard player. Now, on another continent around the same time, that there was this other band that was starting to make headway, and they're now probably the world's most popular metal band, and that's Nightwish. And I didn't know about them back then. Like I didn't really know about them, right? And I wondered, like in hindsight, like we were a lot more raw sounding for sure than that. But we had that more kind of raw Canadian metal core kind of sound, hardcore sound. We weren't quite like Motorhead, but with a female singer, but we were. It was like Dawkins with a female singer. It was kind of like that. I found that the riffs I was writing at the time were very, very George Lynchish. From my memory, like again, I couldn't even name. I think it was one song called Nosferatu, and then there was another one that she had written. It was called Only You, and I really don't remember hardly. I remember maybe two or three riffs. I wish I would have had a copy of all the songs. It would be cool to listen to them today just to see what it was like. I didn't go into the studio with them. I left the band just as they did that, and in '95, and of course the band fell apart. Very shortly after that. And that was kind of like the make or break band for me. Like that was kind of again, that's the last band I've been in as a full band. Now I've jammed with people, many bands and stuff like that between now and then. But like as okay, we're getting together 3 times a week or 4 times a week to play live, and then jam once in a while. Like we had a warehouse that we were renting, and we never really used it because we were always booked at a gig. So like the gig was the jam session, you know what I mean? Which was cool, it was cool. But then it was hard to work on things because we were always so busy. We did this for like a year and a half or something like that. Like we didn't play 4 nights for a year and a half, 4 nights a week. But at the height of it, we were playing 4 nights a week, and plus I was working 2 full-time jobs on top of that. So I don't know how I'm still alive. Like I should have went catatonic from lack of sleep. But when you're in your 20s, right? So anyway, uh, so I see where Nightwish is now, and I wonder, like if we would have been able to stay together, who knows? The band could have fallen apart for many reasons, but I mainly got out of it just because I was exhausted. I was just completely burnt out between working all day, working around the clock, evenings. Like I'd finish a gig, and from the gig, I wouldn't even go home. I would just go right to like like a night shift thing, and it was just crazy. And I remember one of my friends was saying to me, like, do you ever sleep? I'm like, uh, and I remember one boss was saying, he goes like, geez, dude, he goes, you're like a zombie sometimes. I said, well, yeah, like he knew how much I worked and everything like that, and I was a hard worker and everything like that. It never stopped me, but he could tell I was burning out, right? And again, I wasn't on drugs. Yeah, I drank a little bit. I'm not gonna lie to you there, but like I never showed up to work drunk and stuff like that and whatever. And I remember even some of the band members like you're going to work, right? Like it's 3:30 in the morning and you're going to work. Like, didn't you just like get off your shift to come here to play the gig? I'm like, yeah. And they go, and you're going back to work? I said, no, it's the other job. They're like, you're nuts, you know. So it burnt me out, and I quit, right? And I remember having a conversation with my drummer, and he was like, like, it was just before we had joined this band called Syndicate, and he was like, we've been in a lot of bands together. He goes, I wonder if it's you and me that are holding each other back from making it big, right? And I mean, in hindsight, no, neither of us were holding each other back, but it was something that had crossed his mind, like maybe we need to find other bands ourselves. I'm like, well, whatever, if like, and it wasn't like said in any harshness. It was just kind of like, well, like, are we just going to be these, cover band, whatever? Are we just going to like stagnate like that, right? And I'm like, I was looking at it as, well, you got to play in a cover band for a while, and then from a cover band, maybe go into a tribute band, and then from a tribute band, you get into the originals, and when you get into the original material, then maybe you make it big by the time you got a fan base. Because you have to understand, there was no social media, there was nothing like that back then, because the internet in 1995 wasn't much of a thing. It really wasn't. Like, it was a thing, but it wasn't like, there were chat boards, but you couldn't post live videos, and photos and all that kind of stuff. It just really didn't exist, until MySpace and stuff like that came out. Yeah, MySpace. It's funny that I would say something online that would date my age, but it's like you don't know the half of it. Okay, MySpace, you think that's dating me? How about this? Metal roller skates and lawn darts. Yeah, 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 yeah. There we go. Evil Knievel rules. Uh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. So I'm a product of the '70s. So, but anyway, so we had this conversation, and I thought about it myself. After we talked about it, and I was just like, I don't know. Maybe we are holding each other back. Whatever it is. And then I went to see a guitar clinic with Rick Emmett from Triumph, who I love Triumph. I think they're an awesome band. They're a Canadian band. Like I know Rush gets all the limelight. See what I did there? Yeah, but you know, I think Triumph, like I just like I like their music more. They were more of a party rock band, but Rick Emmett was like a really cool guitar player, right? He still is. I mean, the guy's still touring. Like, I mean, yeah, sure, he's long past the glory days, but he still plays like here and there and everything. So you can tell the man does it because he loves the music. I think he even still plays with his son. Like, son's like like the lead guitar player now. And I mean, we're talking about Rick Emmett here, so it's like. They're doing Magic Power, and here's his son wailing away on the solo. So I'm like, like the guy's doing it because he loves the music, not because of the ego, right? So I'm in this place called the Penguin on Elgin Street in Ottawa, and they had a guitar clinic, and I didn't know, I'd never been to a guitar clinic before, and I didn't know what it was about. And Rick Emmett was there by himself, and he had acoustic guitar, and he played a couple of songs, and then it was more like Q&A stuff, right? And there was a guy that asked him, he goes, "What do you do when you're with a bunch of buddies and but they're kind of, they're never going to leave the garage kind of thing. Like, like do you stick with them in hopes that they're going to leave the garage, or what do you do, right?" And Rick Emmett answered, and I remember the answer because it made so much sense what he said. He goes, "Well, look," he goes, "I can't tell you what to do." He goes, "The thing is you have choices." He goes, "You can stick with your buddies, okay, and hope that, they either get better at what they're doing or take it more seriously or whatever." He goes, "You can do that, and that's a gamble." He says, "Or you can look for other people that are, you don't know, and but have the same interest as you, and same goals, and take that risk." So what he was telling you was basically it didn't matter which way you go; it was going to be a risk either way, you know. But how bad you want it. It was pretty much what he was saying, like how bad you want it. And I asked myself the same thing too, like how bad do I want to be the greatest guitar player in the world? Like when you're a teenager and you're first starting off, learning some metal riffs and stuff like that back in my Ibanez days, it was just like, was I going to be the best guitar player in the world? And how do I measure that? And you have to understand, like 1980s guitar playing is very ferocious. It's very competitive. The fastest player, like you had to be faster than Jakey Lee, and then you had to be more, like Jakey Lee was like the fast guitar player. Like the guy was, just did these really crazy fast licks, right? And then out comes like Ingve doing, these insane arpeggios and stuff like that. And then you got Joe Satriani and Steve Vai, and it's just like, okay, well, Joe Satriani and Steve Vai kind of ditched the speed thing and just did this vibrant, really creative sounds that, like it wasn't always about the speed. It was just, but they were so creative, right? So it was the whole goal of being the best guitar player, the fastest guitar player. And I remember trying out for many different bands that were, okay, dude, you'd make an okay rhythm guitar player, but you won't make it as a lead guitar player because we need somebody that's better than you. And like some people would take that to heart or whatever. And I've been the rhythm guitar player a few times, but I'm almost always ended up as the lead guitar player because on average I could do more than. I'm not saying I was better than anybody, but I'm just saying, I had more experience, right? I had more experience because I was like in band after band after band after band. I might have been in 20, 30 bands between high school and my early 20s, right? And then just all the jam nights, all the jamming with these guys, helping out this guy, say, hey, we just need a guitar player for like an opening act. You want to jump in, and I do stuff like that. And of course, to me, it was always, yeah, sure, I'm game. Why not? Because I enjoyed it. Like and I still do enjoy it. Like for me, it's nice to get up on stage with a really well rehearsed band. You know what I mean? Like that. Like every note's accounted for, and you could do more than just three-chord rock or like what you heard in the beginning of the like that little video where we're just playing in one, pretty much on A major. That's the whole song is in A major. Like there's really, okay, just do licks around A major. Okay, one chord for the whole song. And you can get away with it. You can get away with it on a jam night. But if you want people to go, whoa, you got to do stuff like what I was doing in that band Syndicate, where it's like, here's this crazy guitar solo with these, insane whammy bar tricks and stuff like that. And of course, you'd steal from every popular guitar player out there and try to be the impressive guy. But I used to always get the, uh, what was it like? Like people would be like, "Wow, you don't sound like anybody else," kind of thing. And of course, I always talk about how good my stage sound was, and I wear that with a badge of honor because I was just like, it was one of those things that I knew my guitar sounded good, particularly my Hammer Diablo. It was just a I talk about that guitar all the time because it was such an awesome guitar, but it was just I was able to dial in a really good sound, and then of course with the soundmen that some of the places I played, some of the soundmen were pretty crappy. I will say that, but some of them were just. There was one guy named Rick Smithers, and he was just phenomenal. And he was all over the place. You'd go play somewhere and be like, "Hey, it's you again." You know what I mean? So I got to know the guy, well enough, and he would tell me, a couple of times, he was like, "Reg," he goes, "that's the best sounding guitar I've ever heard live." And I mean, comparing me to many other, like I said in the last video, like, this is like this guy did sound for like, or at least, accompanied sound with big, like guys like Ingve and stuff like that played in the same bars that I played in, once in a while, like, there'd be a tour and, these guys would show up at the, the bars that we would play, we were always like, just cover bands and stuff like that, but, maybe once, twice, every 2 or 3 years, you'd get like Ingve come into this bar or whatever. It was a bar called Roxanne's. The other one was called Grand Central. And Grand Central, they had, I seen so many bands there. I mentioned it in the last video. I won't go over them all again, but like bands that these were professional bands, right? And stuff like that. And we'd play that, and it was like, okay, I knew the band sounded good. The bass player sounded awesome. Dave was an awesome bass player. Scott was a good drummer. He played a set of Pearl exports, but he was really into it. He knew how to tune his drums, and I remember listening to his drum kit one night. And I'm like, man, his drums sound good, And I'd heard of probably about 100 Pearl exports at this point on stage, stages, just seeing other friends' bands and stuff like that. Everybody had Pearl exports. It was either a guy had like a $5,000 set of Tamas or Pearl exports, right? And it was just like Scott's sounded really, really good. Like whenever they'd mic up his drum kit, it was just like that drum kit sounds phenomenal, And he was a good player. Like he was a good drummer. He wasn't super flashy, but he was tight. He held the. And again, he was a fairly new player when he'd only been playing for about a year or 8 months when I met him. So after like 5-6 years of being in bands together or whatever it was, like he had grown so much as a player. And then of course, like just him and I being so comfortable with being, like it's just kind of like he'd kind of read my mind where I'd be going and stuff like that with, my playing because he was so familiar with it. And I remember one time, this is kind of funny. There was this guy. We were looking for a singer and a bass player or whatever, and it was like, well, we could do a power trio or whatever. And at the time, I couldn't really, I had no real abilities to sing, and neither did the drummer. So anyway, we auditioned a couple of singers, and there was one guy. He was a bass player and a singer, and like when we read his ad, it was just like, okay, this guy sounds like the guy we want. And we got there, and this guy was he was pretty strange. He was very strange. Uh, and whatever. He was fun to jam with, but it was just like there was no way this guy was going to be in our band. You know what I mean? Like, and I wasn't a judgmental person at all, but it was just like I knew it wasn't going to work. He was just too strange. I won't go into why he was so strange, but he just was. And then this other guy shows up as a vocalist. And he comes in and he's got his hair all done up, and he's like this big Queen fan, right? So yes, I can speak. Freddie Mercury is like his, uh, like his basically his idol, right? And the guy had phenomenal vocals, like phenomenal, like not good, not great, phenomenal vocals, right? But he had the attitude of like Yngwie Malmsteen. You know what I mean? Like young Yngwie, where like just like this extremely big ego. Like how does his head fit through the door? His ego's so big, and he was like that, and he was like trash talking Scott, like kind of like, well, when you're doing drumming, you got to do this, and there's one thing you got to learn when you're in bands is you don't tell other people how to do their job, right? You can make suggestions, but there gets to the point, and he turns to me and he's like, he goes, like we just did kind of like this off the cuff kind of original riff. Like, he goes, see if you can come up with something on the spot. And he had some lyrics that he was bouncing around of his own songs or whatever. The guy's ego was like way overboard, right, for the level he was at. Not that he wasn't talented, he was super talented, but just like this would be a guy that would be very hard to work with. But he would also be a guy that would probably get noticed on stage because of his talents, right? So he was aware of his talents, but he was just, way ahead of his, like this is a guy that, not signed, no, he was no better than us in that terms. But anyway, I remember we did some stuff and we recorded it, and it was like, this sounds really, really freaking good, like, and Scott was just like, no, I was going to punch the guy in the face. He was such an asshole, and I was like, and stuff like that. I remember the drummers, he was like, his girlfriend was like, wow, is he ever good? Is he ever good? And he was just fuming. But I remember he turned to me and he goes, because I did a couple of leads or whatever, lead breaks or whatever, and he was just like, well, you'd make an okay rhythm guitar player, we'd have to bring in another lead guitar player, like that kind of thing. And I was like, okay, well, whatever, I'm happy either way. But I was kind of like stunned at that. It's like, well, like I've never had somebody talk to me like that before in the band. It's just like, hey, you're gonna do the lead or the other guy gonna do the lead, you know what I mean? And it was weird for that, like, and I'm just like, like I can get along with anybody, right? And you got to understand, when you're in a band, it is like a marriage. It's just you're in a band with, like you're married to 4 or 5 other people, or whatever band members is going to be, right? And you really have to learn how to deal with other people in the band. Some people are a little more temperamental than others. Uh, Most of the bands I've been in, everybody's been pretty happy-go-lucky. You know what I mean? But like for example, when we right after that we ended up in another band that called Reckless Angel, and we did well and we sounded good and everything like that. But those guys were the guitar player Rob and Stefan, the singer. The singer looked like Kurt Russell or Jack Russell from what you call it, Great White, and we used to tease him about that. He used to hate it, but it was like, but he kind of sounded like him, and he kind of looked like him, but he was an okay showman, you know. But to get these guys out of the freaking garage, it was almost impossible. It's like, oh no, no, the show's not good enough yet. It's like, are you afraid to go on stage? It's like, no, no, it's good enough. And we ended up with this bass player. He was kind of like in 10 bands, whatever, type of guy, but a really good bass player. And so we had a really good bass player. We had a really good, guitars and vocals and drums and stuff like that. And we were a good cover band, but we only did a handful of gigs together before we broke up because it was like we were rehearsing all the time, a couple of nights a week, and it was just like, okay, yeah, like, okay, after 2 months, like, it was like 6 months, and said, okay, let's do a gig, or, we're out of here, kind of thing, right? And even I was kind of like, we can't just rehearse forever. You know what I mean? Like, we have to pick it. Like, we have our set list. Let's go. You know what I mean? It's good enough. And I don't know. I think of what it was maybe the singer was a little bit nervous to play live or whatever. But when he was out on stage, he was great. Like, he was really good and stuff like that. And everybody that listened to us, they were, like there was always girls dancing in front of the stage, right? So that was usually an indicator that you were doing pretty good. Like if you had people up dancing, And again, we played like Megadeth, we played all kinds of like rock, metal, whatever, and it was really good. And then after that, we ended up in Syndicate. So we went through, I went through a lot of bands, and it was kind of like, okay, which one of these bands is going to be the one to make it? And Syndicate was the one where I thought, hey, if we were going to go anywhere, it was going to be that band. Now, getting to Nightwish. Now, Nightwish, okay, I didn't know about them that, but I looked at some of their old stuff from about 1998 and stuff like that. And so I think they started around 92, 94, 95, something like that, right around when my band was starting. And, I probably discovered them in about 98, early 2000s, something like that. I remember a friend of mine who's one of my roommates, a guy I went to school with, and he was like, hey, Reg, check these guys out. And there was them in Evanbridge, and I was like, wow, this is symphonic metal. I never heard that before. I was like, that's really cool. And like, was I, while all the other bands, were going grunge and stuff like that, which I was never into the grunge. I never really liked Nirvana and stuff like that. It was okay, like I'd listen to it if it was in a bar or whatever, dance with the girls or whatever. But I never really got into the grunge because I was just like, it was like they gave up on the guitar solos, they gave up on the power riffs, they gave up on all the challenging stuff. And I don't know if that was done just because my theory was there was guys that couldn't compete in the, maybe somebody got a talking to like I did, and they say, you know what, if I can't be the lead guitar player, I'm just not going to play leads. You know what I mean? And we'll do grunge chords instead, slightly detune our guitars, and we'll do it that way. And grunge music killed the fast guitar player. I think we can all agree on that. But that said, look at the resurgence of talent now. Like you've got like Periphery, you've got bands like Polyphia. Is it Polyphia? Anyway, it's insane stuff that they're playing. Like it's very, very challenging, right? If you want to hear a really cool song that I've heard recently, it's from a band called Amber Dawn. The song's called Dragonflies, and I'm like, yeah, that's the type of band I want to be in. Like it's a really cool song. If you're into heavy riffs, neoclassical riffs and stuff like that, it's really, really cool. It's called Dragonflies. You'll know it when you hear it. Like it's really, really good, and whatever. But getting back to that, so the band breaks up. I break up or I jump out of the band first. So I didn't like, it wasn't a harsh thing. I was just like, guys, I can't do it anymore. Sorry, like, and they're like, they understood it. Whatever. Yeah, no, don't worry about it, dude. Like, because they knew how like crazy my work schedule. Like, I was working 103 hours a week at one point. Like it was just insane. And there's only 168 hours in a week, just so you know. Yeah, so I didn't get much sleep. So I quit the band. I felt bad about it because it was kind of like it was the end of a dream. Like I say, if Syndicate would have stuck with it, would who would be headlining, Nightwish or us, right? You never know. Maybe it probably wouldn't have went that far, but it could have been a stepping stone to the next band, to the next band, to the next band, right? But I never gave up. But I did do something that I regretted, and that wasn't getting out of the band. What it was because I was so physically and mentally exhausted at that time in my life. Uh, Whatever I had, I just like didn't play my guitar hardly at all. And I think there was like a 3 year patch where I literally didn't pick up my guitar. And I remember one day looking at my Les Paul, and it was just covered in dust at the edge of my bed. I was just like, because I was renting a room at the time, and it happened to be that like I normally worked 7 days a week. I did it for 2 years straight, where I worked 7 days a week, and the only days I took off was Christmas Day, 2 years in a row. That was it. That was 7 days a week. Even my friends were starting to complain that, Reg, we don't see it. Like, are you okay? What's what? I was night shift, day shift, morning shift. I said, I just don't have the energy to go see anybody, right? So I barely saw my friends. I'd call them, and whatever I get a chance or whatever. But they were just like, like, you're gonna burn yourself out, right? But that was life, It was a recession in the '90s, and money was tough, and wages were shit. Like I went from 4.25 an hour up to 7.50 an hour in like 2 years. You know what I mean? Like, so it was just a shit show, right? So anyway, I'm looking at my Les Paul, and it's dusty and it's dirty. So I pick it up and I dust it off, and of course the guitar's pretty horribly out of tune. It's been sitting there for a while, right? So I dust it off, and I just did a couple of chords on it, and it was just like, wow, like my fingers, like that hurt my fingers a bit, and I noticed I had no more calluses left. So I played for a bit, and then I started cranking out some of the set list from last time I was on stage, and playing some Green Day songs and some Megadeth and some whatever else, and a few riffs from some of our songs from Syndicate, whatever. Next thing I know, an hour goes by, and I'm like, okay, well, there was nobody in the house. And right beside my other side of the bed was my Mesa Boogie half stack, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just put it on low. And I plugged it in, and I started playing. I played for 3 hours straight. And it put such a grin on my face. And from that moment on, I told myself, never again will I ever not play the guitar. So I made it from pretty much that point. This is back in the '90s. Pretty much that point, from 1995 to, I guess, 1998, I pretty much didn't play guitar at all. Maybe I picked it up once or twice, but I just don't remember it. So I would say there's like a 3 year span where I just didn't touch the guitar. And I said I will never do that to myself again. And it was kind of like a rebirth, because what I had realized, it wasn't about the band, it wasn't about the guitar, it was about the love of music. And that was probably the best lesson that I was ever taught, that it didn't matter if I made it big or not. It really didn't. It would be nice if I did. I mean, again, all those years have gone by, and I'm still not anybody big, whatever. I just hit the odd jam night, but I still have fun every time I do, and it totally changed my philosophy of how to view, music and bands and stuff like that. And one of the things that I got out of it was that, the music is always from within. The instrument is the tool, and the quality of the instrument is just the icing on the cake. And when you're in your room, you are a musician first. When you're in the studio, you're a musician first. When you're on stage, you're an entertainer first. And one of the things that I think I was more addicted to was the entertaining angle of it, rather than being just the musician of it. So it didn't matter if I played lead or rhythm guitar. Uh, if you really enjoy it, you really enjoy it, because I think I enjoyed the audience more than anything. But there was also something else that I learned, especially after 1998. I started doing jam nights, going to, like, this bar here, that bar there, whatever, and just go up for, get your 15 minutes of fame, because I was having a hard time getting into getting into bands. And one band that I nearly joined, I sort of joined the band, but again, I sort of lost it. And I can't remember if it was before. Yeah, it was definitely before. It must have been around 93, maybe early 1994. Uh, and it was, no, probably, no, it was probably more like 1993. There was a band called Great Scott, and they were an AC/DC tribute band. And I tried out for them because they needed a new guitar player and whatever. And they accepted me. They're like, yeah, yeah, we'll get you in the schoolboy uniform, and you can use our, like the band's SG till you can, till we get rolling. And these guys, they were, all they did was old Bon Scott era AC/DC songs, and they played, up north. They played across the country. They'd go on like a 10-week tour, and then when they'd come back to Ottawa, what they'd do is they'd all like scatter to the wind and go back to their day jobs, and then get a bit more money, and then their promoter would book them on tours, and they were getting good money at some of the places they went, and they're probably even still around. And the thing is that I was about to do it, but again, the work took over, and I missed out on that one. But I'm kind of in a way glad I didn't, because I think it was after that I ended up in the band called Syndicate, right? Or Reckless Angel Men Syndicate. Two different bands, but same drummer, same guitar player, and then you know, two different bands, right? But what I noticed was that, like, when I got back into it, okay, it was kind of like, okay, it was hard to find people to jam with. It was like I tried to get back into a band right away after 98, and into the early 2000s. And it was just like nobody had time, whatever. And I think, was it just the adulting thing, or was there something more to it? Like, it just seems like nobody wanted to join bands. So I said, well, while I'm doing this, I'll just start hitting these jam nights and stuff like that. I did, and I enjoyed the jam nights. And I'd go up, I'd play a song, practice a couple of songs, play them. And I noticed when I went up there, it was like, okay, it was the same thing over and over each jam, like different bars, different whatever. And it was like people, a lot of them are first time. There was always the guy or girl, the first time they've ever played live, right? And I always enjoyed watching somebody's first time playing live, because it's usually kind of cringy and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not doing this to insult. I think about my very first gig and how cringy it was and stuff like that. And then there was one guy. He was like, like, everybody's kind to you when it's your first time on stage. People clap. Nobody boos you. I mean, I've only ever seen one guy get booed, but he was like doing some weird grunge 20-minute long, going way over his allotted time of 15 minutes, and just doing this like screamo thing. And it just, yeah, they unplugged him. He was just too much, you know what I mean? Um, but it was like, I'm watching this guy, and I've seen him one week. A couple of weeks later, I see him again, and he's improved a bit. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, he's coming out there. He's like, "How the hell are you?" You know what I mean, kind of stuff. And he's like, he's still playing the same three songs he's been playing now for a couple of weeks, but he's got it down now. And I talked to him and whatever, and because he had watched me, he goes, "Man, you're so good live," and stuff like that. I'm like, "Well, thanks," like, it means a lot, when people appreciate you. And I always did the little joke where because I'd walk in and I'd listen to the first 3 or 4 people go up, and you could tell that, it was their first few times ever playing live. And I'd always go up and say, "Yeah, this is my very first time playing live." And I'd do a little joke where I'd basically grab my fingers and place them on the frets, as if I didn't know how to play at all, and say, "Yeah, I just learned last Tuesday. I'm ready to go. You guys, I can act real nervous, like," and then just wail into something like really extravagant, like maybe I do like Pipeline or something like that, or some sort of instrumental, just start doing Whittly Diddlies and shredding, and then you'd see people, ha ha ha, very funny, because yeah, guys, pretty much a professional musician, well, professional sounding musician. Professional, I think, is a loose term for, like, what is professional. If you get paid, like some people, the first gig you get paid, that makes you a professional. Okay, you make a living off it, you're professional. I think it's more of your attitude towards it than anything, because I've seen some phenomenal, mind-blowingly good musicians who'd never get paid a cent. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's more of the attitude being everything rather than how much money you make out of it. Because like you have to make $1,000 a month to be professional, $400 a month to be for professional, $4,000 a month, 100 grand a show. Like what's professional, right? So I think it's a spectrum, but I think it all comes down to your attitude when you play, and how well you play, and how, like I say, when you're on stage, the first thing I learned about being on stage is that, yeah, you got to have your guitar tune, you got to know how to play and all that good stuff, but you are a entertainer first when you're playing live. And if you go with that philosophy, then the second question you ask yourself is, and I only heard this a couple of years ago. It was the guitar player Christian Bush from a band called Sugarland. They're a country band. They're really good. Like, I like metal, I like country. I like just about it. The only thing I don't really care much for is rap and hip hop. But other than that, I pretty much anything with a guitar in it I like. Right. And Christian Bush said something really, really interesting. He said, he goes like, you can watch our videos and stuff like that. We love that. He goes, you really got to come and see us live, because he goes, when what they had decided as a band was, if you were going to see a band live, what would you want to see? And I thought, what a noble concept. I mean, it's like, okay, well, if I was watching a guy playing a one man band thing with an acoustic, what would I want to see him do? Like, what would be make me go, wow, that'd be cool. You know what I mean? And then I started thinking about, okay, well, if I was in the audience watching me, what would I want to see me do, right? You know, and that I think has made it even more interesting, because it's just like, okay, well, how do you catch people with the little hooks and little, like the little crumbs of something, and then hit them with something really awesome, you know what I mean, that they're not expecting. And the stage show, I think, becomes the talent. It becomes the thing that you get known for. And again, how do you make it big? Everybody's got these, here's your 10 steps to success and stuff like that. It doesn't work like that. If it did, trust me, like if you play 4 nights a week and you don't make it big, it's not the 10 steps to getting big, oh, well, all you need is to promote this way and promote that way. No, you have to understand one thing about musicians, and this is just being realistic, is there's an overabundance of musicians on the planet. Like, like it's like, I don't know what the ratio of how many people out of 8 billion people play music, but it's probably close to a billion people. So probably about 1 in 8 or 10 people is a musician. That's your competition, right? To a degree. But that said, is it really your competition? Because there's room for all, everybody to be a musician, because you never know what people are going to like, right? So some people are going to like death metal, people, some people are going to like country. And to me, it's one of those things that I would never ever give it up, and I haven't. Like, I've stayed so enthused by it after you lose that kind of, make it big kind of mentality. Like, am I going to make it big with this band or that band? I think just focus on the playing. If it happens, great. Try to make it happen. Like, if you can get a, foot in the door somewhere, go for it. But on the other hand, I think just concentrate on putting on a really good show, no matter what size audience. If it's 3 people or 30,000 people. The biggest crowd I've ever played to, I think it was 5,000. Was it 5,000 or 15,000? Anyway, it was a big crowd. It was, for what we were doing, it was big. You know what I mean? And it's cool to see that. Now, how many of them were actually paying attention to us? I don't know, because it was like there was a whole bunch. I think there was like 10 bands there, and we were just like somewhere in the middle, and we played, and it was just like, oh wow, that's cool. Like, to see that sea of people just walking in. I remember the guitar player was like, he was looking at me. He's like, dude, I've never seen so many people. I said, yeah. I said, now imagine them all naked. And he's like, cool, yeah. Now imagine that they see you naked. He's like, not helping, because he used to get stage fright a little bit in the beginning and stuff like that. So I used to tease him a bit. Probably wasn't funny to do, but he would do it to me. So, yeah, like yeah, it's like be just about to start a song and he'd come and pull my jack out of the amp or whatever. Yeah, ha, ha. And we'd be doing stuff like that, stupid stuff like that all the time. So, not all the time, not enough to get each other mad, but like a joke once in a while, right? So, yeah, pull your guitar jack out of the amp or whatever. Yeah, it's like, what? Ah, you bastard. But we had a lot of fun doing it, though. We had tons of fun doing it. And I think that's what I enjoyed the most was watching the people have fun. And I still do. Like when I go up in the jam nights now, it's like I go up there and I'm like, okay, well, what am I gonna, what can I give to the people? And this is the biggest thing I learned after the band. Now, uh, one of the things we used to do and I wasn't the only one doing this. Obviously, most bands in their 20s are going to do this. Is we go on, and the one rule we had was you can drink as much as you want, but you have to be able to play your instruments. Once you're at the point where you can't play your instrument properly, then you're either out of the band or you got to stop drinking, right? And so I never got so drunk on stage that I couldn't play my instrument. I would always moderate myself that way. But it wasn't till I started doing the jam nights or open stage night, if you want to call it that instead, where like I'd go up and I'd have maybe one or two drinks or whatever, and pretty much be sober the whole night except for like a little a drink, like a one or two drinks, right? And then when I started driving, obviously I couldn't drink, right? So I'd go up on stage and be like, okay, well, gotta, it's going to be weird being in a bar sober, but, like completely sober, and just, I'd drink a Pepsi or something like that, or a Coca-Cola. And I'd go up, but then I'd play the show, and it's just like, what I was missing was the booze actually dulls your senses a bit, and you get way more of a high off of playing sober than you will ever get with a buzz. Like you might think you're enjoying yourself, but trust me, you're not enjoying yourself. And once you get that high, you will never drink on stage again. You will never drink on stage again. Not a drop. Why? Because you don't want to ruin that experience. Why? Because you get to see everything. You get to hear everything. You get the full experience. That is the drug. And to me, that's like, I mean, you can't put a price tag on that, And I think that's probably what I live for the most on it. So would I ever give it up? No, never. Because to me, it's like when you play live, that's what it's about. Now the studio stuff, I'm interested in that too, and I got my own little 12 track recorder and stuff like that. And it does, it does the job. It's not great, but it does the job. And the thing is, that stuff is something that you can always kind of do, right? There's no real, you know, anything. You could do it in the comfort of your own home. Now, some people go to the studios. Back in the 90s, you went to a studio because there wasn't really any way to set up a home recording studio practically. Like, you could do it, but you had to buy so much equipment. You needed, all these DAT tape reels and stuff like that, and it just wasn't cost effective. Um, but a studio, you didn't go to the studio until you had your songs down fully. And I'd only been in the studio maybe once or twice, and it was just like, okay, just record a little bit, and then we would rent equipment. Like instead we'd rent equipment because it was $120 an hour for the studio at the time. I don't know what they would charge now. Like now it's probably like just it's like $10,000 an hour or something like that. Who knows? But it didn't really matter that much to me because it was just like, well, I bought like a little Tascam tape recorder type thing, and you could get ideas. You could never get a good production out of it, but you could get ideas down. And then I sold that off and bought like a digital recording in 2005, 2006. I think it was 2006 that I bought it, my BR1200, and that is, did a lot of other things, but it's still the same thing, getting the time to do it, all that. Uh, Always finding time is the thing that costs you the most as a musician, because it's like finding the time to play whether you're a family guy or just working all the time or whatever. You got to squeeze it in when you can squeeze it in, and it's not always easy just to hit the record button, you know, all the time, because it's just like there's a lot of things that have to happen to make that happen smoothly, right? So you have to have the quiet time. You can't have the dog barking in the background kind of thing, or the kids, hanging off the chandeliers type of thing. Or if you live in an apartment, there's dump trucks driving by your street all the time, stuff like that. So sometimes it's just hard to find the time to do that, but you could still do it and work on your songs, work on your music and whatever. But you can also get the advantage of when you work on things at home by yourself, uh, you get really good really quick. And then it's a matter of how do you put this into a show. And that's the way I look at it. So, still play live, still do this, still do that, whatever. But worrying about whether you're going to make it big or not. I mean, there are people out there that's their whole goal, and I think you have to love the music first. And if you, the second that becomes not your number one priority, it seems like it's usually downhill for there for most people. So the reality is 99.9.999% of people are not going to make it, in the music industry, right? So if that's a discourage for you to quit, then the chances are you probably don't love the music that much anyway, or you don't love playing that much or whatever. Anyway, if you're willing to give up because you didn't make it big or whatever. So for me, you can joke about washed up rocker. I always call myself a washed up rocker or whatever. But I also look at it that I still love the music and I still love the art of entertaining. And I don't care the size of the audience as long as I give them the best I can give them. And I think that is probably more fulfilling than whatever. Yes, if you can make it big and make a living off of it, you know, that's phenomenal. And try to do that as much as you can, because there's a lot of ways to make a living in the world that are much harder than being a musician. You know what I'm saying? So if you can make that happen, make it happen. But sometimes it's just the way the stars line. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's just hit and miss. But until you get a hit, you might as well just enjoy the ride and just be the best musician you can be. So I guess that's all I got for now. Thought it was an interesting conversation to have. You guys tell me what you guys think about it. Like, did you ever give up on music just because you didn't get that far, or did you stick with it? What were your thoughts on it? So I'd like to hear from you guys too, because I think these are interesting topics. So anyway, next to that, all links down below to help support the channel. Thank you so much to everybody who has. Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing. Have yourselves a great day, eh?